that I'm deaf from flying the Tomcat. That
Yeah.
thing was just, it was so loud. I loved flying the F-14, really did. And most folks, the guys that grew up flying F-18s, they always give the Tomcat community a hard time because it's kind of like the old joke. How do you know there's a fighter pilot in the room? He'll tell you. It's kind of the same way with the F-14 guys. So we'll tell you it's on our watch, or we'll tell you we'll start talking about the F-14 at some point. So I love flying it. People ask me, sometimes, what do you like better, the Super Hornet or the Tomcat? And standard weapon school answer, it depends. What are
Yeah.
we doing? So if I'm flying in an air show, hands down Tomcat. I mean, that's the coolest airplane ever, I think. Just sexy, the wings, sweep. It goes super fast. It's loud, awesome. But flying in combat, the Super Hornet, everything's just integrated, right? So when I was in the Tomcat, that's my first deployments. Kind of when we first had the infrared pod, the FLIR, the lantern, and then we had night vision goggles. But when we flew night vision goggles, the cockpit wasn't built for that, so we basically would turn off all the lights in the cockpit because it would wash out your goggles. We had little finger lights on so that you could see, and then the technique was go get a bunch of that black electrical tape and put strips on the back of your helmet, so when the lights are leaking through, you could cover them up with the black tape. So I went from flying that to the Super Hornet that's got the joint helmet mounted cueing system, the HUD, everything's integrated. And you're just like, wow, this is pretty awesome. So
I should have Googled it, and I should know this, but like last Tomcat flight was 2005, 2006 time
The
frame.
last Tomcat deployment was the Tomcatters of VF-31, 2005-6 time frame.
Okay.
Interestingly, I was the aide for the four-star at U.S. Fleet Forces here in Norfolk, Virginia, which is right next to Virginia Beach at the time.
Okay.
And Admiral Nathman, he had been a Tomcat guy as well. So at the sunset ceremony for the Tomcat in 2006, he was the guest speaker for that. So I was there as his aide watching the last Tomcat take off. A little tear in my eye. So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty sad.
Yeah, a lot of hours, a lot of traps. We got to talk about that. But compare the Tomcat when you first started flying it after flight school to when it was sunsetted on the way out. What
Yeah,
was it capability? Yeah.
completely different machine.
Okay.
It's amazing to me how fast the Navy adapted. I think it was lessons, learned from the first Gulf War. There were some air-to-air engagements and stuff, but really, um, the Tomcat mantra is probably like the Eagle drivers in the Air Force. They were like, we're air-to-air. That's what we do. That's all we do. There used to be a saying, no, what they say? Not a pound for air to ground. Basically, they didn't want to drop bombs, didn't want to do any of that, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And then I think the community itself kind of realized, and the Navy at large, hey, we've got to do something, this FA-18, right, fighter attack. So it's got to have some other capability to maintain its usefulness. So that's when the Lantern targeting pod first came on board. Was a little bit before I got there, but it was still fairly new. With that, so that gave us the capability to detect targets, but also guide laser guided weapons, which was kind of a new thing. At least the precise ones, which was good. We started flying with night vision goggles, and I think the biggest change was there were three variants: the A, B, and D model. I flew the B predominantly, but my first deployment, the HUD was basically a nuisance. We would turn it off, honestly. I mean, it really there wasn't a velocity vector, there wasn't really anything in it. And you talk to F-18 guys, landing on the boat at night, no HUD that's an emergency.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
my first deployment in the F-14, coming in at night to land on the ship, I would turn off the HUD because the stuff just kind of got in the way and it wasn't really useful. And the Hornet guys were just like, what?